We are on Facebook, the Book of Face. We've got springs,
but still
we've
not
got
on
springs.
Instagram. But
And
there's a
lots
lag.
of suspension things. Oh, hey,
There's a
Steve.
delay. Hey, Chase, I still don't have
You're
you.
a delay.
And this delay is a lot. Wait a minute.
Why can't you just trust me, Steve? Why can't you just believe? It's there.
Hey,
It's
you're
live.
on there.
You're
You're on there. Well, guys, today is Tech Tuesday, and we are going to be talking about rebuilds versus revalves. And you know who's just in time? Justin Smith.
Good one.
Let's go talk to him. Thanks.
I like that one, actually. It's pretty good. Well,
Thank you.
Chase, look at you hopping to it. He's running over here and everything. And Steve's got new names. It seems like everybody's doing research on what we're paying attention and trying to improve what we're doing. Wow. Speaking of improving what they're doing, Chase, I'd like to point out to everybody.
Woo!
How many t-shirts do you have on today,
First
sir?
off, look at, come prepared. You got one, you got two, and you got the sweatshirt.
And Justin,
Technically,
clearly
two
he's
shirts
paid by
and
S&M
the
too.
sweater.
Yeah, he's definitely putting a shout out to S&M.
Yeah,
No, I only got one paid sponsor, the Dirt Light. Or Camel, YXE.
Hold on, let me do it there. I got you. I'm doing Chase's job right now. I've got his face cut off.
Yes. That's crucial. when
Yeah,
filming.
hey, do me a favor. Lift your arms. Prove it.
Boom.
Oh,
Hold on.
my God.
Oh,
What's
oh.
this?
Wow.
Do test.
They're not damp,
Yes.
and he smells okay. I'll give it to him. I'll give it to him. He smells
What's
okay.
wrong with you, bro?
Chocolate by Axe. It works.
What a douche.
Well, I'm proud of you, honestly. And everybody, I'm proud of you because you're making everybody else's experience around you better. And that's
what it's all
for
about,
of us,
Justin.
That's for sure. So, Tech Tuesday, right? It is Tuesday. I hope it's Tuesday.
It is
Steve, is it
Tuesday.
Tuesday?
It is Tuesday,
I do
Justin.
lose track of time. I apologize. But it's Tech Tuesday, and we are talking about rebuilds versus revalves. I really like all the text that's up here, Steve. Thank you very much for writing that. Is your left leg shorter than your right?
The board is on an angle. It's on.
Because wow, I mean it's completely legible and it's spelled
Hold on,
right.
I can do this
but-
right here. Just hold
There
the
you go,
camera
Chase.
like
Loves
that.
it. All right.
I already know how to spell.
So let's get into it. So rebuilds versus revalve. Now, if you're in the industry, this seems fairly simple, but honestly, this is something that we get a question from a lot of our potential customers about what the difference is. Because if you don't know anything about shocks, I mean, let's just face it. Why would you know the difference between a rebuild and a revalve? And a lot of people think that they're the same. They absolutely are not. Let's talk about the differences with some detail as to why they are different. First, rebuilds. Rebuilds should, in our opinion, be done on a UTV about every 2,500 to 3,000 miles. Now, this is a moving target because it depends on how hard you drive yours, depends on where you're driving it, it depends on a ton of factors. I mean, if you're in South Florida in sandy, salty conditions, then you're going to destroy shafts a lot faster and shaft seals. We see a lot of that, a lot of shock damage from that area because of the salt. If you are desert only or sand only, you're going to get a lot more time out of it. But if you drive really, really hard, then you're going to get less time out of your shocks. Shock preparation and cleaning is important. Make sure you don't leave mud on the shock that dries and then you drive on it that way. And it's basically just mud sandpaper inside that divider shock body area and wears things out. So always make sure that you clean them. But that 2,500 to 3,000 miles really depends on you. Now, what we get a lot of is, when do I know I need to rebuild my shocks? Well, if it's not typically on your mileage because you don't have any leaks and it's just got 2,500 to 3,000 miles on it, is due. Other than that, then if the shock leaks, time for a rebuild. Now, it can leak in multiple places. It can leak on the shaft seal, which is the most common. I don't have, right over here, complete set of shocks. It'll leak on this seal up inside the seal head, and oil will drip down the shaft. Typically, it'll soak the bump stop, and this will be wet. It might attract dirt and dust. It might attract a lot of sand. Steve, are you? You have a smile on your face. I'm guessing it has to do with wet shaft.
I just
and
love the
bump
way you're
stop.
talking about the wet shafts and and seals, and
You had that look on your face.
it just brings me joy.
And the half chub was something that I noticed as well.
You're welcome.
But a soaked bump stop, and also if it's really bad, then this can leak enough to leak off the bump stop and actually drip oil off the bottom of the shock onto the floor of your garage or your trailer or toy hauler or whatever you've got. So if you see oil dripping off of a shock onto the floor, then it's definitely way past what it needs to be rebuilt. If you see a shaft that's on the damp side, or you see a bump stop that's damp, but it goes away, so the first trip it's damp, the second trip it's not, then that might have been just residual oil left over from rebuilding the shock and not needed to be rebuilt, or residual oil from having the shock apart, I should say, whether we're doing internal work or we're doing a rebuild. But if it continues trip after trip, then it's definitely time for a rebuild. Other things that let you know that you need a rebuild is a change in how the car or UTV rides. So if you've lost a shaft seal and you lose oil, typically you're losing nitrogen pressure faster than you are oil in that shock. When you have no nitrogen pressure in the shock, it will run soft. It'll tend to bottom out a lot easier. So if you're driving your UTV, it was perfect last trip, and then all of a sudden, midway through your next trip, it bottoms out everywhere on one right front corner. Well, that's a sign that you've got internal stuff that you need to worry about with that. Steve.
Justin, so for a dripping shaft, should they call shock therapy?
Don't Google that, I would say. But yeah, for all of your other dripping shaft needs, then please. give us a
Justin,
call.
and who should they call? What's the number?
They should call 1-800-CHASE. They'll take care of all dripping shafts instantly. So, boom, that's
Great
quick.
suggestion, reloader
That's
guy.
pretty good. That's pretty good.
But if you don't want to talk to Chase for any weird shaft needs, then 623-217-4959. Boom, just like that.
Jesus.
So other things that you might want to look out for, or signs to require a rebuild, is besides the obvious leak, besides the obvious, hey, this thing all of a sudden bottoms out everywhere on just one corner. I mean, I don't mean the whole vehicle all the time, but you know, you've got maybe a noise. Say, back to the right front quarter reference. If that right front corner is where you're bottoming it out a lot, and all of a sudden you hear some clunking, if you have no nitrogen pressure in the shock, and you've lost some oil in it, the internal reservoir piston and some other things can make noise when they smack up against the bridge. That's a technical term for if you hear clunking in a shock, it's bad, get it rebuilt. The simple version of that. Other things, how about Mitch, what other things would you throw at somebody? Hey, if it does this, then rebuild it.
Adjustments. So if you're throwing a bunch of adjustment into it and it's still not changing the ride quality, that's a sign of that.
So you're chasing it like, hey, you're turning compression up and it doesn't affect it, it still bottoms out?
Yeah, like especially the walker side of things, like, I don't know, you're throwing 6 to 12 clicks of adjustment into it and it's not changing your bottom
nothing.
out resistance or anything like that. That's a really good sign of that too. I honestly wasn't really listening because I'm reading the questions, but
Okay, Matt, what do you
I was
got?
just thinking of that. So
I had to
There you
grab
go.
my other phone.
Oh, okay. Never mind. You looked like you were super worried all of a sudden that Mitch had your phone. Putting dick pics in there or something.
We were able to hear you run out there, man.
Hey, Steve,
we heard him breathing.
for you, Matt.
Steve, what other suggestions would you
No, I
give
thought we weren't
people
getting called.
to look out for signs for a rebuild?
So I know as far as the side of like losing nitrogen, a lot of people have mentioned to me that you get that pogo feeling, so you get a lot of springy feeling, and then that would be along with the ride. You said your ride changes quite a bit. So, I mean,
Oh, Chase, you did not turn your ringer off.
This is true, but we're still live. We're live.
You didn't turn your ringer off, sir. No. I think it's more than a hand slap.
hey, Mike Dubs, do you have any suggestions?
I think at this point we're going to have to make this much. It's going to have to hurt more than just a hand slap. I mean, really, you have one job, sir.
This is very true.
Mitcholi?
And you're doing it, I don't know, badly.
He looks frightened.
He's wondering if I'm going to kick him right now. He's looking at my foot.
The phone ringer's not off. I gotta wait
he
for
is-
more phones don't come in.
He is so worried he's gone. I mean, and you know what? Probably should be. I mean, just
Here, hold on. Let me help you out, Chase. Let me help you out.
So
turn the
yeah, it's a new
radar
phone
off.
case. I can't get to the side I thought it was. I actually tried to do it as I was over there.
All right, I apologize for Chase, you guys. Hashtag no Chase.
One thing.
That's,
You have one damn job.
Thing.
So leaks. Let's go back to the board since we're just throwing this out there off the top of our head. Shaft leaks are obvious because you can see them. What causes the leak? Well, shaft leaks, there's a million things that cause it. Typically, if you get the right amount of dirt or rocks sitting right on top of this bump stop as you're driving along, if there's dirt and rocks sitting on top of this at the same moment that this gets completely compressed, it can shove the dirt and rocks right through that shaft seal and take it out. Now that is easier to do in the dunes when you're following people because the person in front of you is throwing sand on it all the time. It's easy to do in muddy environments because mud's going to sit on top of that. But it is not something that any of us can warranty because you can do it in the first mile that you own the shock. Brand new vehicle or just rebuilt. So shaft seals industry-wide is not a warrantyable item. But we stand behind it when it comes to a short period of time. So if we've just touched it and within the first week or two there's something, then we'll take care of it. But after that, we just don't know what the vehicle's done, and the industry doesn't know what the vehicle's done, and they cannot ever back that up. Steve.
Justin, a really good question. It kind of brings up one of the points on there from our boy Triple Digit Sketch. He said, when revalving, is it more beneficial to rebuild at the same time?
Good question, and thanks for bringing that up. We're going to definitely touch upon that for sure. Here is the deal. As far as what we charge, when you drop shocks off to us and we're going to do just a rebuild, it's $125 per shock, so you're going to spend $500. That is the labor, that's the oil, that's all the seals, everything involved in completely freshening up that shock. If you do rebuilds while we're already inside the shock doing internal modifications and you don't have the labor to crack the shock apart and deal with all of that, all we're doing is swapping seals while we're inside of it. At that moment in time, we charge $100, right? For $25
$25 per shock, $100 total.
$100 total, so you're gonna save $500 by doing it when we're inside the shock. I'm gonna get to this here in a second, but I'm gonna say very quickly, it's often not needed and not necessary to rebuild them while we're doing the internal work. But I'm gonna go over that here shortly. So it does save you money, whether you need it or not. We'll definitely tell you no matter what. Matt.
Jason Childress wants to know, his XP1000 has Fox 2.5 bypass shocks and Resi's in front and it's really bouncy. He checked the nitro and it's still at 100 pounds. 3.0 in the rear seems fine. 2-seat dune car.
There's a ton of things that can affect that. There's a lot of factors. I can't even go into all of them, but if it still has nitrogen, 100 pounds is low. 150 pounds would be what we like to see minimum, up to 200 pounds. If you've got any leaks, rebuild them. If it's just bouncy, uncontrollable, then more than likely it's got an internal leak. I'm going to go over internal leaks right now that you can't see, and that would affect how the shock works, and more than likely that would be part of your problem. Yes.
Would you also consider that wheel hop? Because I had another customer asking about under 10 miles he gets wheel hop.
Yeah, it can be. So if the shock is worn out internally or it's blown internally, then typically it doesn't control the tire, and so when the tire is flopping around on small chop and chatter, usually that means it flops even higher, and you can feel it. Sometimes it's even rough in the vehicle. If you're looking at the front tire, you can watch the thing bouncing uncontrollably. Now, bouncing this high is not uncontrolled. Bouncing this high all the time up above the fender on a washboard road is, and that is a sign that you need to do rebuilds. Steve.
Is there any problem if I buy a spring kit and my shocks have 7,000, assuming he's saying kilometers, and they've never been rebuilt? Is that a bad thing, Justin?
Well, it's not a bad thing if they're not blown up. And we have seen people that have gone 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 miles without touching the shock. That just means that you're really good to the UTV and good to the shocks. They haven't been overheated. They haven't been run that hard over the term of their life, and they haven't seen a bunch of salt water, and they haven't had rocks and sand sitting on the bump stop. I mean, all of those things are luck based, and I would absolutely rebuild it at 7,000 miles, but I wouldn't rebuild it just because you got a spring kit on old shocks. I would throw the spring kit on there, and when those things leak, then do it.
Justin, this is a very specific question on a Turbo S and or dynamic shock. It says, what is causing my dynamic shock to leak fluid from the electronic valve? Is that a common problem?
So Steve, I'm going to let you talk about that because you just had a set of adjusters apart looking at that.
So what it is there is two main seals on the inside of that solenoid that sits on top. and it usually just leaks through. It is actually, I don't believe it's actually leaking from the wires.
No,
when we looked at
it does come around
It comes
the wire.
around the wire and goes to the top. So it's actually not coming from the plug itself or the female side of the plug, but there is 2 main seals in there, and we're actually working on getting seals for that to make a kit to where we can actually fix that instead of what we've been doing in the future or in the past is replacing that entire adjuster.
So it won't, in here shortly, we can just rebuild that for you instead of having to replace the whole thing for $300 or more because
They're expensive.
So it'll be cheaper to fix it. Is it normal? Is it a common problem? I wouldn't say so. We see it. We see a lot. We see a lot of shocks. How much is a lot? Like what? 2 sets a month? Probably, Steve. About like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 set a month.
Once or yeah, something like that.
Okay. Well, that's one set in 1,000 sets a month for us. So it's not that common, but we have seen it. Matt, what do you got?
The customer wants to know if Krx Springs are in stock because he needs to spend some government money.
Good question, and they are, right, Mitch?
We just got the new lower in, so yeah, they're here. We got to make the sheet for them, but I would like by the end of this week they'll be available for all of the new KRX stuff without having to replace the divider, the retainer, all that stuff. It uses all the factory parts, so you get just a spring kit.
Perfect. Now, does that make the spring kit cheaper than what we've been selling them for?
Yes, it does.
It does. So
Yep.
the price is going to come down, you guys. And the reason is we don't have so many components that have to go into the kit to allow us to use a spring that's available. We actually had springs made, and now that cuts down the cost by having less components. That make sense?
Absolutely.
Now, be patient, you guys. We're 200 to 300 orders behind consistently off the website right now. The shipping guys are working 12 to 14-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week to catch up. We'll get there, but it might take us 4 or 5 days to be able to get to your kit to be able to ship it. It's not the same day. Right?
Yeah.
Steve? Yeah.
I'm just laughing. So Rich Fortin and our boy Mike Dubs are going back and forth. No, Michael, we have not forgot about the tacos and beer. We're still waiting.
But I think he's on his honeymoon, right?
He's on his honeymoon. Congratulations on that. But when you get back, it's
I
go
still
time.
want my tacos and
It's
beer,
go
Mike.
time when you get back.
We have given him a pass for the marriage and the nuptials.
Yes. That was a while ago. Huh?
Right?
Yeah.
But you will be required to come in here and talk what's up.
Yes.
That sounded so bad. Mitch, what do you got?
Great question. Do you include replacing the spherical bearings or bushings in the rod end top cap in a $125 rebuild?
We
No.
do not. The reason is they typically are going to go 10,000 miles in those spherical joints. Unless it's a walker, those go a lot quicker. But we check them during the rebuild, and we will tell you they are not needed or they are needed. And if they are needed, we'll absolutely replace the ones that are needed and not the rest. No reason to blow money where you don't have to, and they last a long time.
Another great question. Sorry, Matt. Brian, I just saw this.
That's what I was
My
about to
shocks
say.
are at your shop getting springs and internals tomorrow. Question is, if you think they need rebuilt, do you automatically do it, or do you get a hold of me first? I think that's a topic we were going to talk about too.
But go ahead, Mitch, tell him.
It's all inspection. So we get a ton of cars that are brand new, or cars that have 500 miles on them. It's kind of the tech's responsibility or whoever's working on the shock to inspect that. If they feel like they need it, they will reach out to you and say, hey, it's a cheaper option to do rebuilds at this time while we're already getting into them doing valving. We'll always get a hold of you guys before we decide to do anything to your shocks in advance and give you knowledge and information about what it might need. So
you will get the phone call. You
Yes.
will get the phone call. We will tell you if it's needed or not. Usually, we're not going to force anything upon you that isn't needed. So if you're 500 miles in and we inspect it and it shows no obvious wear issues, you're not needing a rebuild, and we're not going to push that.
Yep.
Matt, you had something too.
Yeah, Tom says, I know you guys aren't fond of the Talon, but I think it suits my needs for Ozarks trail riding. He's asking, do we recommend live valve with our revalving or standard, like the Walker Evans shocks with our revalving?
Okay, so on a Honda, you will have the choice to buy that when it's new. You don't have the choice to do live valve after the fact. It's too expensive to add. Hopefully I answered that correctly. But no matter what shock you have on that Honda, you will have a huge improvement if we get inside of it, especially on the Honda. So whatever package you buy, we can improve it. I would suggest if you haven't bought the vehicle yet, you buy it with live valve, because I prefer that, and I think it's a better system. It'll ride better. So do that if you have the option. If you already have a car and you don't have those options, then we'll just do whatever you have for shock.
IBPs too are a good option.
Ooh, tell them.
IBPs are a great option.
IBP. Steve, what's an IBP?
An internal bypass shock. We do have them in stock for the Talon, correct, Mitchie?
So we have complete sets of Fox
right?
internal
Yeah.
bypass shocks, which is an aftermarket option for a Honda. They did not come on it,
They did not come on the shock, and it is a bitchin' setup.
and we are the only one with it. That was
is-
a kit designed for us after testing with Fox. And if you guys want to take maybe the walkers or something else off of your Honda and put an internal bypass on it, we have that kit. So pretty awesome. What's that?
They're Foxes. I haven't seen walkers on them yet, but I do have a question, and I kind of think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. So
Lights
says,
on you, Steve.
What?
Lights on you.
Perfect.
Lights on you.
Steve, if the electronic top of the dynamics has a problem, will that cause the dynamic system to sense a failure and shut the system off? My answer would be I have not seen that. I have not seen it shut off. So I'm going to say no, but do you know the exact answer to that? Because I've never seen anyone have a failure due to that.
I don't know the exact answer,
Okay.
but from the small conversations I've had with the engineers, it shouldn't.
Okay.
The electronics isn't going to monitor a pressure change due to a seal breakage, and it still will work whether it's got a leaker or not. Matt.
Jay wants to know 2021 Pro XP with live valve. Stock nitrogen PSI was 120. How does 200 PSI feel better?
Stock nitrogen pressure is not 120. It might have been what you measured on there, but the factory is always sending those out at 200 PSI. So that means you've lost some, or the physical act of checking it with a gauge usually is a 20 PSI drop. Just the is 20 PSI. You check it twice, there's 40 pounds gone. So if you have 125 in it, I would put 200 in it. But let's just say factory was 125 and you put it to 200. The difference is it's going to be a little bit more firm in the chop and chatter, but everything when it comes to big jumps, big landings, and G-outs is going to work better and it's going to bottom out less. So nitrogen pressure is important, but only to keep it consistent. Other than that, it's not a tuning tool that any of us use. Or let me put it this way. Nitrogen pressure is not a tuning tool that any reputable shock person should use as a tuning tool.
Sure.
All right, back to the board.
Back to the board.
Back to the board. All right, internally bumped. So shaft leaks, what causes that? Luck of the draw for the most part, internally blown. There are seals on the inside of the shock that can blow, allowing nitrogen to mix with the oil. If that happens, you're never going to see a leak, but all of a sudden the thing's going to ride like crap. It's going to change everything about how it works. It will be a lot stiffer in the chop and chatter on that corner, and it will also bottom out at the same time. So it can be stiff and soft at the same time. Resi cap leaks, unclean resis and false leaks. So a lot of people call us and go, hey, I need to get rebuilds because on the bottom of the reservoir cap right here, they've got either a little bit of fluid, which is easy to have if the shock's been taken apart and put back together. So I wouldn't worry about a little bit of a leak around this outside edge unless it persists after a couple of rides. But also on this Schrader valve hole, on the end of this cap, a lot of times people will check this nitrogen pressure here or add nitrogen pressure there, and they will get oil that spits out and think that the shock needs to be rebuilt. Typically, there's always going to be some oil residue there from assembling the shock, even brand new. So a little bit of oil is okay. A film of oil when it spits out is okay. But if you open that Schrader valve and it just pours oil out, it's got a blown seal. But I wouldn't worry about a little bit. Steve, you got one in your hand. Show people what we were talking about sometimes.
So a lot of the time oil comes out of here, or you'll see it through the needle system that they use from the factory. You will see oil seeping out of that center section right there.
So when do you worry about it and when don't you, Steve?
When would I worry about it? Well, I always do the cap press test. If I can press the cap down, definitely have lost.
Which you just did. Show that on Chase's deal.
So if I push it down, I'm not pushing down hard, but if you push down on that and it ends up going down, means you've lost, pretty much complete nitrogen in the system. That's when I would be questioning what's going on with it, or if there's a ton of oil coming out of here.
From multiple trips, not just one trip.
Not just one trip. No, multiple trips, multiple miles
Right.
on your car.
So Matt.
Troy Wood says he's had his Walker Evans shock serviced 4 times here with both shock tune and springs. He goes, it gets better every time.
Awesome. So that actually brings up another subject we'll transfer right into.
Yep.
That is, if you are on the upgrade program with us And what I mean by that is, if you send your shocks in on a routine basis, say every 2,500 to 3,000 miles, to have us freshen up the shock with rebuilds, and we've already done the internal work, then you get all of the internal upgrades, updates.
So I say updates is what you're talking about right now.
Internal updates for free. So we constantly test. So let's say you did an XP 2 years ago, we're doing it now. We might have all new setups for that ride even better, and we're going to modify the internals to bring it up to date with the newest internals. And that's what he's talking about. Is every time we touch it, it gets better. It's because we're rebuilding it and giving you all that free update.
Now, what's an upgrade, Justin?
Upgrade. Here we go. So there's a difference between an update and an upgrade. Update is basically valving, piston, simple things that we can modify. An upgrade is something that's fairly expensive on the inside, like an internal bypass tube. So you don't get new bypass tubes, which is an upgrade, for free when you do rebuilds. You can pay the upgrade cost and get bypass tubes if we've modified them and have new ones for you to jump up to. But everything on the piston, valving wise, is basically free when you do rebuilds on a routine basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Triple Digit Skits, I agree with you, brother. He said Chase needs updates, 100%.
Yeah, I know.
I think we need an upgrade.
I think Chase needs an upgrade.
I think he does have an upgrade.
I'll say we do have an upgrade. Go ahead and film.
Can we do a GoFundMe to get Chase an upgrade, which would basically mean we get another camera guy and he's out of here. I think that would be good. All right.
He's being quiet.
He's so quiet today, even after we complimented him on his 3 shirts. He's so worried. Upgrade versus updates. The difference is valving versus expensive internals like bypass tubes. Cheaper to get done together. We kind of talked about this earlier, but yes, it's cheaper to do rebuilds. They're only $25 a shock when we're already inside of it doing internal work. But it might not it might not need be done, or needed to be done. I just messed that completely up, but you get the point. You may not need it. We're going to tell you if it needs it. And the reason that we don't just automatically rebuild every single shock that we see when we're doing internals is because majority of the shocks that we get to do internal work are fairly new. They've taken their UTV, brand new, they took it out one trip, they hate the way it rides. We're getting those shocks within 100 to 500 miles. Does not need a rebuild, it's a waste of money. That's why we don't rebuild automatically. We do it only when it's needed. No spacers on the shocks. Last thing on this, before we get into internal mods, when you send shocks to us for rebuilds, it says right on all of our shipping sheets, do not send the spacers with the shock. Now, if you look at this shock right here does not have any spacers on the end of it. This one has one. These spacers with O-rings, especially on walkers, because they fall out easier than on the Foxes, are easy to get lost. They get lost in shipping, they get lost in the box get a small hole, they're gone. So we tell you in all of our paperwork, do not send those. Send the shocks, pull the spacers out. We don't want to be responsible for losing them. You get them back, you try to put them on, missing spacers, not our fault. Don't do that. Mitch.
Little off topic, but stoked to shred. Purchasing RC2s from you, was wondering about internal bypass race series shocks. Is it worth it, or just the regular RC2s just fine? Pro XP Racing Sportsman. And then do the RC2s on the site come with internal bypass? I think they only offer the RC2 for the XP Pro, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's just either the Walker Dynamics or basically the RC2 upgrade. I would stick factory wise. I would stick with the RC2 personally. You get high speed, low speed, and a rebound adjustment out of the shock itself. It's way more tunable, especially racing Sportsman. I think that's where you're really going to see the benefits of that shock itself. We do have them in stock. I saw another question about that from him too. We basically set that up for whatever you're doing. So spring-wise, valving-wise, racing Sportsman, whatever weight you have on the car. It's a great upgrade for that car, especially if you, I'm assuming, have the walkers, because you're probably not going to make that switch if you have the dynamics. Right. Kind of why we offer it, because it is a way better shock than the walker shock is, especially for what you're going to be doing with it. So
right. Back to the original though, he was, I think, asking, do an RC2 or do a bypass? What's your opinion on that?
Oh,
there's goods and bads with both.
It's kind of a double-edged sword either way you go.
For the money, I think an RC2 is the one to run.
For sure.
But if you have bypasses, I think they tend to ride a little bit more plush. and absorb the same hits than
Typically
an RC2. But
bigger shock too. So.
it is a bigger shock, so it's kind of unfair comparing the two because usually bigger is better when it comes to that.
Yeah.
They're more money though. I mean, a complete set's another $1,000, $5,000 a set of 4, and it's also a lot more weight. You're going to spend 65 to 70 pounds more weight in a bypass set on a vehicle with springs than a set of RC2s. So lighter shock that works just as good, as adjustable or more. You might sacrifice a little bit of the plush, but if you're racing, you don't care.
That's set up too. So you buy it's sent to you, set up for you, rather than buying.
You're saving a
IDP.
couple grand right there.
Yeah. So that's my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but it's a lot less. I mean, you're $3,000 less than setting up bypasses. $5,000 for the shock stock plus spring plus internals.
Yeah.
I think I'd do RC2.
Yeah. They said ordering today. Steve, what's the turnaround?
Just set up RC2s.
So typically we say 4 to 6 weeks. We have been cranking them out. I'm going to say 4 to 6 weeks, but hopefully it'll be sooner than that. That's just what we're saying. Usually it's been 2 to 3.
So back to the board. We've pretty much covered everything that's on here has to do with rebuilds, right? So now you guys are completely up to speed what a rebuild is. How is that different than a revalve or any of the internal mods that we do inside the shock? It's actually completely different. I'll show you over here. On this workbench, we've got a couple things to show you. We've got internal bypasses taken apart, so shafts, pistons, valving, everything laid out, also bypass tubes. Over here, we've got all the seals that are typically in a rebuild kit, plus oil, which is obvious, we don't have to lay that out. But when we do internal mods on shocks, we are physically changing the function of the shock mechanically on the inside. We're modifying the pistons to change different oil flows. We modify the shafts on certain shocks. We modify the valving, of course we change that. Also, we are changing bypass tubes on a bypass shock. If it was an RC2, we might change bump stage settings, we might change internal shaft flows, we might change rebound. One-way valves, we do make our own one-way valves for rebound setups on RC2s. But we'll change all of these, including the port sizes and hole diameters and locations. By doing these mechanical changes, physical changes, it affects how that shock works, rides better, rides plusher, gives you more bottom out resistance, and more control. Those are a lot of work, a lot of time, and that's why internal work is $750 for a set of 4 shocks, because we have a lot more time in it. We have a lot more parts in it. A rebuild is literally just taking the shock apart, changing the oil, but then changing every single one of these seals and taking the parts off of that shock to change those seals. So it's rebuilding a shock is a little less work than doing the mods that we do internally, but rebuilding and modding a shock is a lot more work than each by themselves. You can save money by rebuilding while we're inside doing the work because you've already got the shock apart. It costs more to rebuild the shock from scratch because you have to take shock apart. But the main difference, rebuilding a shock is freshening it up, bringing it back to where it was stock. A internal mod is improving how the shock works, the ride quality gets better, everything about the UTV works better. It is not making the shock brand new. It is actually making it function better. Steve?
There's quite a few good questions that have just come in, but one of them is, since you were talking about the bypass tube, what do you do with the bypass tubes that you change out?
So I'm not going to give you all of our secrets and give you a blueprint to what it is, but I'll tell you this. We changed the total amount of flow that bypass tube is capable of flowing through the bypass portion of the stroke of the shock. We change it to where it's progressive. We increase flow in certain areas, we decrease flow in certain areas. We change the side stacks, either stiffer or softer shim, so that it affects how the shock works. We change the piston in some cases, we change piston flows in most cases, we change valving on every single case, and on top of that, sometimes oil depending on the use, and we make some rebound modifications, including one-way rebound nuts. Steve?
Another question from Yuma Dirt. I will be sending my shocks in June. Do I leave the limit strap brackets on or do I remove them? You can leave them on. You can leave them on if you want to. No problem. Leave them on. They don't affect us.
Short and sweet.
That's it. Only thing you got to do is take the spacers out. Don't send them with spacers, because if they come back without them, it's not our fault.
Yeah, limit strap brackets are cool. Spacers.
Yeah, they won't go anywhere. That's for sure. Mitch, looked like you had something. Anything good?
There's 2 comments about Chase, but I think I'm gonna.
Yeah, we'll just skip over those.
Oh, does he have fans?
He does. Grease Monkey said, "Got my shirt in the mail today. Good job, Chase. Someone should give him a treat."
A tree.
Yeah,
Someone
a
should give him a
treat.
kick in the
treat.
Like a dog. Like a dog treat.
Oh, I see. Actually, I do have something for you, Chase. So Alan, tech director for Best in the Desert, had a conversation with him today. He would like you to know he has not received his shirt yet. And of all the people you probably should have sent a shirt to, I would suggest he's high on the list. So that's another reason to fire Chase today.
What a jackass.
That was because he made his
Phone right.
he made us wait so long at the last tag. So.
Wow.
So yeah, you're really helping us out when we get to the next race. Thanks, Chase. Now, any other questions or things you wanna point out?
I do have one
Mitch,
more.
what do you
Sorry, Rich Fortin. If you come across a rod, I'm assuming he's talking about a shaft that is chipping. Do you rechrome or replace it?
Cheaper to replace.
Yeah, always replace it. It's not worth the time and effort to try and rechrome it.
Yeah, rechroming, dude. Number 1, you got to strip it, and then 2, you got to do it. You got to chrome it, and then it has to be a hard chrome, not a typical chrome. I mean, the cost in doing one of those is way more than the cost of a shaft. We just buy shafts, always. You should see the inventory of our shafts, Chase.
I
Piles and piles of them in the doors.
I typically check them out right when they first get here. I like to see all new shafts in the building.
He does physically
kind of like
inspect every shaft.
Mike Dubb wants to see the back of Steve's phone case.
Yeah, Steve, what do you got on there? Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Is that SpongeBob or is it lunch boxes?
It's butts.
It's what?
It's butts.
Butts?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, you're right.
I'm a butt man.
I was going to say that answers everyone's question, butt or boob guy.
I'm
for
a butt
Steve.
man.
Obviously.
There we go.
So how about we revisit the beginning of this and wrap it up a little bit? So, rebuilds versus revalving. Here it is in a nutshell. And that is, rebuilding freshens up a shock, brings it back to the point where it was originally factory. Rebuilding does not make shocks work better. It brings the deteriorating function of a shock because of time back to where it was in the stock form. Redoing the inside, revalving, and all the other mods that we do improve the shock function, improve ride quality, smoother in the chop, stiffer in the big bump stages, jumps, or stiffer in bump stage so that your jump landings are better, no bottoming or less bottoming, and overall function of the vehicle is better. So major differences between the two. Now, can you combine them? Absolutely, and it's cheaper to do together. Steve.
Justin, this is actually a really great question because this has nothing to do with internals, it's more external. It says, when do you recommend replacing shock bodies when the threads are worn?
So if the shock body is worn to the point where the threads are no longer threads and the threaded portion of the body is smooth because those threads are worn down to 0 thread, replace it. I would say that if you took a straight edge to a shock body, sort of like laying a straight edge on the body like that, and you can see an air gap in here. If that air gap is deeper than about 45 or 50 thousandths of an inch, you can use feeler gauges or things like that to check it, then I would absolutely replace it because most of these are 120 wall, 90 thousandths wall tubing depending on the shock, so you get to the point where you're halfway through it, you should be replacing it. If you don't see threads, it's gone.
Hourglassing too.
Hourglassing. So in the smooth body portion where it's starting to wear a hole into it or a divot into it, hourglassing that system, that's when I would throw straight edge on it and measure it. So 40 to 60 thou, throw it away. You must be in a sandy spot to be able to burn through a body like that, or it's a aluminum body walker.
I'd say probably the 14 to 16 walker bodies, which we do have steel body upgrades.
Shameless plug.
Shameless
Boom.
plug. You're
Just
welcome.
like
And if you want those, you can call into 623-217-4959 and get on the schedule.
You guys have anything else you want to touch upon? What do you got, Mitch?
I got a good question about race rack rebuilds.
Okay.
And I've been asked this a couple times, and I will admit I am not very knowledgeable on the race rack side of things. How often do you recommend rebuilding the race racks?
Well, it would be different timing whether it's a Polaris or whether it's an X3.
This guy specifically has an XP 1000.
1000. So a Polaris race rack, I would rebuld anytime that the rack has excessive play. How much play is that? Well, if you turn the wheel and it moves, say, an inch back and forth, maybe 2 inches back and forth on the steering wheel, and it does not move the steering, that's too much pinion play, send it in, we'll shim that up and fix it so that that's tight again and it doesn't have that play. Also, if you grab the tires and you move them back and forth with your hand, and you see the tie rod moving the rack gear vertically, if there's too much rack gear play, vertical, then send it in and we'll rebuild it and it'll tighten that right back up. How much time is that? Depends, because if you're running rocks like a Madman at King of the Hammers, you're going to wear the rack out quicker. If you're running 35s, it's going to wear the rack out quicker. If you're in the dunes or if you're in the dirt and you got a 30 to 33 inch tire, you're going to wear them out a lot slower. The racks might last years. So it depends on how you're driving it. If you've wrecked it too, can also hurt that. If it's an X3 or Can-Am rack, you're never going to rebuild it. You might end up shimming the pinion just to take some pinion play out of it, which is just the gears taking a set and wearing in. And that's it. As long as the thing's greased, you're good. On a Polaris rack, grease it, at least 6 pumps of grease every 400 to 500 miles.
That was my next question.
Only time we ever see racks come back that are worn out, they come back in here and they're dry. You know, nobody kept up on the grease. And that's why we have grease fitting on it. And it says right in there, grease them every 300 to 400 miles, I think is what it says in the instructions. So constantly stay up on the grease from trip to trip, multiple trips, and you'll be fine.
Justin, is it better to bring the car into the shop or ship the shocks in? Now, I can kind of answer this. Mitchie and Josh over there, I'm going to say Mitchie and Joshy, they have been working very hard on install videos. Now, if you're getting internal work, obviously you got to send it in. But as far as spring kits and stuff like that, order it on the website and then watch our amazing videos, Shock Therapy, on YouTube. And subscribe too, hit that button. But yeah, go on there and watch the videos.
So to
and
answer his
it.
question, ship it in, or ship the shocks, or drive, or get the car here.
I would say bring the car here.
Bring the car here because we'll set all the ride heights.
We'll set all the ride heights and everything. But if you don't want to do that, they make amazing videos, doing a great job doing all the install stuff. So we make those for you guys in order to install stuff too.
All right, Matt, what do you got?
Customers asking if they need to make an appointment for rebuilds.
So how are we dealing with that right now, Steve?
So call into the shop and talk to them. Ship us your shock. Right now, it's like a 2 to 3 week turnaround on rebuilds.
So we're not doing specific days for rebuilds?
I'm not doing specific days. You send it in, we get you on the queue, and we kind of go in order. Now, if your shock is completely damaged or there's more to the shock than just seals and oil, it could be a little longer. Been having a little bit of a hard time getting some parts and stuff like that from the manufacturers are behind. So, yeah.
Hey Steve, can we ship the car?
Yeah, Rich Ford wants to know.
Yeah, send it. Yeah, you can totally do it. We've had people do that.
For sure.
Evolution side by side. Does it take longer to get an appointment when bringing the car versus sending the shocks? No, it is identical. You can call the shop, see what the open spot is, whether you're shipping them or bringing us the car. Does not matter.
Right.
AZ Desert. Why is Chase so quiet today?
He's worried.
Did someone poop in his Lucky Charms this morning?
Maybe.
Chase, why are you so
Chase,
quiet?
why are you so quiet? S&M?
Well, you know, I'm focusing on keeping my phone calls stuck in here. You know, quack quack.
Focusing on keeping your job is what you meant?
Yes.
Is that what it is? Okay.
One of the two. I have one from Tony Dunes 22. Thanks Shock Therapy for sending out my shocks yesterday. Quick turnaround.
You got it.
He must have had an appointment.
No, it was a rebuild.
Was
it was. If he didn't have to wait on parts or anything like that, and a couple of them did before him, it would be turned around quicker than the others. So.
Just because
It all
people
just
that were
depends.
ahead of him were waiting on parts.
Correct. So there's multiple factors that go
there's
into
another
that.
thing right there. When you send shocks into us for rebuilds, it is a very good idea to fill out the detailed form about it and let us know if there's other problems. Like, hey, I've got a worn out body, or the shock's leaking because I think the shaft's bad, or I've got a bent or broken part on it. Tell us that in advance, because the shocks are going to get a much more detailed look at them when they come in. We're going to order the parts immediately instead of ordering them when we see the shock for the rebuild process.
Correct.
So we can get ahead of it. That'll definitely help. So fill that paperwork out no matter what. Yes, Matt.
Brent Ferguson just did hashtag no Steve.
Whoa.
That might
like
be
that.
a first.
I can make that happen. I can make that happen.
Hashtag lower socks, bro.
I can't do it. Can't do it.
Nah, that didn't work out. Speaking of that,
Sorry, Chase.
I just got a notification that somebody bought the RC2s. Thank you very much for answering that person's question.
I bet it was. Let me go find them. Born to shred or something like that. Stoked to shred.
Stoked to shred. Thank you very much. Looks like we saw your sale.
There it is.
We'll get to it as fast as we can. You guys got anything else you want to talk about that's not too personal, Chase?
You know, AZ Desert Rat likes to say Chase buys a lot of shafts, and I say AZ Desert Rat, I've had a lot of shafts in my life. I have not paid for one. Thank you.
Okay, there you go.
Wow.
All right. That's TMI, that's for sure.
What are the odds of the person working on my car to have a mustache?
No, very high.
Really, I mean, that's super.
Yeah, like 90% right now.
Yeah, it's pretty.
We're heavy on the mustache
pretty good
beard
odds.
department at the moment. It's not even Mustache May. So,
I'm not even ready for that.
what do you got, Mitch?
We could, I mean, if you want to end it on this, I have learned so much from all of your videos. Thanks for sharing all of the knowledge, Justin. That is from Tadpole_F.
Thank you, Tadpole. Appreciate that. We tried our best. And sometimes we don't know the answer, we'll tell you. But if we do know the answer, we'll help you out with that as much as we possibly can. Thanks for, whoa! What do you got? That was it?
That was just rock
That
on.
was it. You just rocked out. I thought he was giving me one more.
Hey, yo!
That was like a chase. What? Steve?
Yep.
Arm up again,
I'm
sir?
sweating.
What?
What? You act like that's normal, man.
Well, you're beating Chase to it. That is a first, actually. Usually Chase
Steve,
got
if you want, I
beat.
got some extra shirts in my truck.
Nope, I'm good, man. I gotta get some Botox in these armpits.
Let's get out of here. How about you, Steve? Let's take it out.
All right. Well, if you're trying to cancel me from the show, hashtag #SnowSteve. And then if you're looking to buy any parts, go to our website at www.shocktherapist.com or call into the shop at 623-217-4959.